Welcome. Thank you for joining us on this Saturday afternoon. We are going to start our time off together in prayer. So let us just take a deep breath. Remember that no matter where we are and what we're doing, God is always present. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Go forth and set the world on fire. God of heaven and earth, you have fed me your word and sent me forth to love and serve. A missionary, you have called me to be. Even in my smallness and sin, you choose me to sing the song of your love, the hymn of your mercy, the anthem of your justice. Guide my path, Lord. Send me among the people you have made, whether across the globe or across the street. Give me the grace to be welcomed in and the courage to stand out. May my words compel as they invoke your spirit. May my acts shine as they demonstrate your faithfulness. Though I may falter, help me to rise again, doing your will always. And when I depart, may they say, that one was different. That one knew the Lord. Amen. Again, welcome everyone. It is great to see so many people. If you have not done so, please introduce yourself in the chat by saying who you are and where you are from. Could you also please add your email address so we can enter you into our raffle? And also, if there are any questions, please feel free, or that we can't get to, we will be happy to follow up with you afterward. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Bill O'Keefe, who is from Catholic Relief Services. He is our Executive Vice President for Mission and Mobilization and Advocacy. He is based at CR's headquarters in Baltimore, and he oversees our efforts to change U.S. foreign policy in ways that promote justice and reduce poverty overseas. And he'll tell you a little bit more about what that means, but for now, I'm going to turn it over to Bill.
Thanks so much, Mikaele, and welcome everyone. And thank you so much for joining us for this really important opportunity to share about the work of Catholic Relief Services. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how our church is responding globally to the COVID-19 crisis through the work of CRS. Next slide, please. So first, just to get everyone on the same page, Catholic Relief Services is the official relief and development organization of the Catholic community in the United States. It was founded by the Catholic bishops in 1943 to respond to the Second World War. We right now are operating in 114 countries. On this slide, all the places with any color at all, CRS and our 1,929 local partners are working to improve the lives of 159 million people. Next slide, please. Our colleagues have had a difficult year, as we all have, but are still hard at work. I love the example and inspiration of my colleague in South Sudan, who's working at his home in the middle of the seasonal floods there. The pandemic has forced us all to adapt and expand our work, and I'm going to talk a little more about that. Next slide, please. So first of all, the pandemic has had an unbelievable impact on poor and vulnerable people around the world. Already 2 billion people don't have regular access to safe and nutritious food. 1 in 9 people were chronically hungry before the pandemic. And unfortunately, due to the pandemic, the number of people hungry is predicted to double, and it's expected that there'll be 500 million people who will fall back into poverty. It's a crisis on top of other crises in parts of Africa, Latin America, and Asia. Apart from the health risks, which are significant in many, the lockdowns and movement restrictions are preventing people from working and planting and harvesting, which means less income for people who are already struggling to buy food for their families. Disruptions to supply chain, soaring food prices mean less food is frequently available in the market, and those food items and other necessities are available at higher prices, making it more difficult for families to survive. Next slide, please. As we've adapted to this situation, there's a lot of challenges. First of all, most of our work is inherently social. We are working with people who are coming together in refugee settings, in schools, in communities. And so it's a huge challenge to adapt to for example, this picture is in the Bidi refugee camp in Uganda. And you can imagine how we would respond, or how challenging it would be to respond in a safe way. Next slide, please. And of course, like in our own country, it's the most vulnerable who are most impacted. The elderly, people on the move, like this woman and her children, who is they're refugees from Myanmar in Bangladesh. So we're focusing on the most vulnerable who are most affected. I want to highlight 4 areas of our response. Next slide, please. First of all, we're working on prevention through community awareness and water sanitation and hygiene programming. Many countries where we operate actually have a lot of experience with pandemics and have strong community level health programs that CRS has been supporting for many years. We have been helping them to adapt those programs to the new reality. We're also using our existing platforms, for example, our malaria bed net distributions, as opportunities to educate people about how to prevent COVID transmission. There's also a lot of disinformation in many countries, and just like here, and the church is very active in promoting the truth and accuracy about how people can take responsibility for preventing transmission. Next slide, please. Some of what we're doing is pretty basic. For example, providing soap. You can't wash your hands if you don't have soap. And then demonstrating, as this gentleman is doing, how to wash your hands completely using WHO approved techniques that prevent the transmission of the virus through physical contact. We also are providing clean water, because if you have soap and you don't have water, you can't wash your hands. So a big part of our prevention work is basic information, soap, and water. Next slide, please. The second part of what we're doing is supporting local health facilities and healthcare workers. Our Catholic partners are trusted in the communities that they serve. The health clinics and the Catholic Health Network has a critical role, as it does in our own country, in meeting the needs of the most vulnerable. Next slide, please. Our job is to provide the equipment and the training that frontline health workers need so they can stay safe and so they can care for people who get sick. We're also providing water and sanitation stations and other supplies for local health facilities. And we're helping to modify those facilities so that they can isolate or quarantine people who get sick. And finally, of course, we're helping with mental health and counseling for frontline medical staff, because again, just like in our own country, this has been going on for a long time, and some of these health workers are facing great personal challenges going every day and facing the trauma that they're facing. Next slide, please. The third thing, and perhaps in some ways the most important in countries where CRS is working, is we're addressing the shadow pandemics. And these have not gotten much attention in the news in our country, but in some ways, the impact of the virus is less than the impact of the economic and food security results of the measures taken to prevent the virus. So lockdowns and disruptions of supply chains and global trade have really impacted people in some ways more than the virus itself. I'm going to highlight the example of Ethiopia. Next slide, please. Ethiopia is facing a series of simultaneous problems that predated COVID. Climate change has increased cyclical drought. This picture shows a riverbed which has been dry for a long time. It's facing conflict. You may have seen in the papers that there's a civil conflict going on in Ethiopia in the north part of the country. There is a terrible locust crisis that I'm going to highlight in a few minutes. And COVID is overlaid on top of that. The drought and the locust crisis and the inability to harvest because of COVID has resulted in some places in a loss of 90% of crops. Next slide, please. The locust invasion is really, it's kind of hard to, it's hard to explain beyond what's in Exodus and in the Bible, the kind of the biblical plague of locusts. But billions of locusts have descended on parts of East Africa, in particular Ethiopia, and have devoured critical swaths of farmland covering 2 million square miles. This swarm could grow larger and spread across the Sahel region and beyond. And it's expected to be the largest swarm of locusts on record in modern times. Next slide, please. The combination of the locusts, the drought, the conflict, and COVID has really impacted the ability of farmers to grow more food. For livestock growers and herders have had to sell their cattle or have lost cattle to these conditions. And so, next slide, please. So we have been expanding our food assistance in Ethiopia. In Tigray, which is the part of the country that's been impacted by conflict, we've been negotiating access and providing food for vulnerable people who have fled conflict or are otherwise in need. Next slide, please. And are doing so in a safe way. This is a picture of a COVID safe distribution. So families are coming to and are standing 6 feet apart in pre-designated circles. We are organizing the distribution so that there are fewer people coming more often and taking a larger ration with water and hand washing stations to do everything we can to make sure that we're not contributing to the problems that folks are facing and instead are helping to solve them. Next slide, please. In addition to providing food, we also are providing cash or vouchers, which in some ways are provide people more opportunity to take care of their needs in a more flexible way and with more human dignity because of the choice that they have, rather than someone from the outside determining what people need. They're able to meet their own needs as they see fit. The vouchers can be used in shops, local shops, and in the next slide you'll see a local shop that accepts our vouchers and you can see is a thriving business. And so by keeping the money in the community, we're also strengthening the local economy and helping to make sure a young woman like this entrepreneur is able to continue to serve her community and support her own family. Next slide, please. I want to give another example, which is from Sierra Leone, where I had the opportunity to visit 2 years ago and had just an incredible experience and got to see the project I'm about to describe. Next slide, please. In a province of the country, CRS is supporting a school feeding program. And like in our own country, many people and vulnerable families get the food and nutrition that they need through school. And kids need that food to survive. They need that food to to learn, because if you're hungry, you can't learn. And their families need that food so that they are able to make the choice to send their kids to school rather than having them work on the farm where in order to grow more food for the family. So it's an economic choice that that we're able to help them make by providing school lunch. But as you can imagine, looking at this picture, when COVID hit, those schools had to close. And those families without those in-school meals were really stressed. So we pivoted to, next slide, please, to at-home ration, and where parents came and took home a distribution so that they could continue to feed their children and their families. And we did so in a safe way. You'll see on the next slide the young men who are organizing the distribution, demonstrating a safe distance, and as they set up the plan for the day. And the most exciting thing on the next slide is, through the program, we were able to help the schools to organize safe education. Here, I love this picture of these girls sitting outside. That's a radio there that is broadcasting. There's a national broadcast of a curriculum, and a teacher who you can't see who was helping them work through that curriculum. And so we were able to creatively preserve their opportunity for education while also making sure that they could eat. Next slide, please. The fourth point about our COVID response is preparing for vaccines. And we all know that vaccines are the way that we're going to eventually get out of this. Next slide, please. We're working closely with ministries of health, Catholic health clinics and hospitals, governments in the countries where we're operating, and longstanding partners to prepare for when vaccines are available in the countries where we're working. We have a particular focus, and I think this picture captures it, for the most difficult places, the last mile, the people who are in remote areas, not in the capital city, not close to a hospital. And that's going to be what we are focusing on. There'll be lots of organizations who are focusing on, and the governments will be focusing on the broad distribution of vaccines. But we have a real role to play, as does the rest of the church, in ensuring that the most vulnerable get vaccinated. Next slide, please. So on vaccines, we're strengthening health systems and health and processes for distribution in order to enable the reach to the last mile. We're working at the national level and the grassroots level. We are also supporting the church and church health institutions with safe transportation, storage, and distribution of vaccines. We're ensuring access to the most vulnerable. And then the last point I want to mention is we're advocating for equitable access to distributions across the entire world. We believe that that's the right thing to do, and it's also the smart thing to do. As Catholics, our lives and the lives of our brothers and sisters around the world are equal in the eyes of God. We're all created in the image of God. And so we can't forget our brothers and sisters, and they deserve access to life-saving medicines like vaccines as much as we do. It's also the smart thing, because we can't beat a pandemic anywhere unless we beat it everywhere. These variants have made it clear that if we solve our problem here, but we don't address it in the rest of the world, then variants are going to develop, and it's just going to spin back and come and bite us back. Next slide, please. I hope that gives you a sense of how some of the challenge that we face, but also how we are adapting and the steps that we're taking to assist our brothers and sisters so that they can stay safe and survive this pandemic. I want to just share the Holy Father. I'm sure you all watched the moving liturgy that he led in the spring. where he reminded us about the universal impact of this. He also repeated in his recent encyclical Fratelli Tutti that COVID is a worldwide tragedy, and it has revived the sense, hopefully not momentarily, that we are a global community, that we are in the same boat, and that one person's problems are the problems of all. This has really hit us at CRS hard in a challenging way. We've lost a number of staff to the pandemic. We have ill staff members around the world. Our families are facing the same challenges. It's the first emergency that I can recall where those our partners overseas and our staff in the United States are experiencing the same reality. And so it's really an opportunity for us, and I think for all of us around the world, to reflect on we're not that we are part of the same quilt here of response and of dealing with this crisis. So I want to thank you, and I'm going to pass now to my colleague Vivi Iglesias, who's going to talk a little bit more about what CRS is doing in the United States to respond to these and other challenges. Vivi, take it away.
Thank you so much, Bill. So Pope Francis in Evangelii Gaudium reminds us that we need to grow a solidarity which will allow all people to become the artisans of their destiny. And how we do that in the US, CRS and USA, the goal of CRS is to mobilize the Catholic Church in action to combat global poverty, violence, and injustice. So how will we do that? We will create campaigns. We are creating campaigns which are called Lead the Way. Through the Lead the Way campaigns, like Lead the Way on Migration, Lead the Way on Hunger, we want to inspire you. And I believe that changing the world is possible via focused campaigns that align to our Catholic priorities and invite the faithful to take impactful action. Then for many who want to go deeper, through the creation of chapters or communities of CRS supporters whose collective impact is measurable and that cultivates a deep sense of belonging. Finally, we will train and equip CRS supporters to take meaningful action towards ending global poverty. Right now, we're facing a pivotal moment in time. 70 million people, a staggering number of more than 70 million people are displaced around the world. Chronic hunger and malnutrition are on the rise, and 1 in 10 people are hungry around the world. But the good news keeps inspiring us to do more. So how we will do that? Through campaigns. We will learn, we will inspire, and we will act together. So at CRS, in partnership with the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, we believe that by coming together as people of faith and building a movement that has lasting impact, we can lead the way to this new reality and create transformational change for our global family experiencing hunger, violence, and displacement, and also extreme poverty. We are prophetic advocates. Together we can lead the way. Together we can change the world. So CRS chapters are a nationwide structure of groups committed to issues that are related to CRS work and putting their faith into action. They're communities of people who want to take on a deeper, even deeper commitment in their work on pressing global issues. And we have chapters all over the country, over 300 members and in 17 states. Through advocacy and stewardship efforts, we're also inviting our Catholic community to act. And we are asking you today to also remember that we support you. One of the benefits of being in a chapter is the ongoing support that CRS offers you. So I had a video to show you, but we're going to skip over that video because I would like to hear from questions from you. One of the benefits really is the accompaniment of CRS. So we have CRS staff that is with you, we have trainings, and we have ongoing support for your chapter or your communities of solidarity. And what am I going to ask you now to do as a community? The theme for this conference or this Catholic Social Ministry gathering was make justice your aim. So now I'm going to invite you to do just that. If your community would like to support CRS's efforts, I invite you to take your phone and to text the words "lead now" to 30644. So text the words "lead now" to 30644 and take a pledge to get engaged in advocacy, prayer, and reflection on global issues throughout the year. So the theme for this conference is make your aim justice, make justice your aim. I invite you to take a stand with us and act on that justice right now. Lead now to 30644. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivi and Bill, for that great presentation. We do have a few questions for you to answer. If folks have additional questions, please feel free to put them in the chat along with your email. If we don't get to them all, we will certainly follow up with you. So the first question, Bill, we had a couple of people interested in this question was, is the vaccine distribution into the last mile hampered by the need to keep it cool?
That is a great question. And there's two pieces to the answer. The first is yes, but, and the but is the Ebola vaccine in the Democratic Republic of the Congo is actually also a vaccine that requires extremely cold storage, and they figured out a way to distribute that. So we're not willing to just kind of say, well, it's too hard to do it. So I think it is a challenge, but and one that'll have to be overcome. The good news, though, is not all the vaccines that are coming online require that kind of extremely cold storage. So the real best hope is for new vaccines that are just as effective, but that don't require it, because that will mean it'll be much easier and more cost effective. But we intend to, we're not gonna let technical problems get in the way of saving lives. We'll work to make it happen.
Great, thank you. Another question we had is, what is the best way to advocate for equitable worldwide distribution of the vaccine? So a kind of a follow-up to that question.
So a couple things. One, worldwide vaccination distribution of vaccine depends in part on funding. And later in the social ministry gathering, when we start our advocacy, there's going to be a piece around the supplemental appropriations for the COVID response. And there's a really important global piece of that we're going to be advocating for. And that money is going to make it possible for many, many more people to be vaccinated. So, and when we advocate, we should remind our legislators that we can't solve this problem here if we don't solve it everywhere. And we should remind them that as as people created in the image and likeness of God, we believe as Catholics, we can't leave anybody out. If we make those points, we're advocating for vaccine equity.
Great. And I think it looks like we have maybe one more time for one more question. How is CRS working in these communities with the local farmers and food companies already existing within the community? So the cash voucher programs you mentioned seem like a great option to engage with community financially, but would love more information on the food industry aspect of this. If you have that, if not, we can follow up.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I kind of was focused on the beginning of our agricultural response, which is really what we call helping people to recover. But we also help farmers in a stable environment to grow, which basically means to connect with markets so that they can sell their crops and eventually set up their own, hire people and expand their farms and get out of the subsistence existence that so many find themselves. So it's a longer conversation, and I kind of focused more on the emergency side of our work, but there is a very significant developmental effort to connect farmers with markets, which means working with local producers and buyers and sellers.
Great. Thank you, Bill. And thank you, Vivi. For all of those that answered or asked questions that we couldn't get to, please know that we have saved the chat, and I have done a lot of cut and pasting that I will figure out between now and tomorrow, and we will get the answers to your questions. And some of you wanted some links, so we'll make sure you get that as well. We also want to encourage you to stop by our exhibit booth and ask more questions that we have answers to, that we're open anytime during the plenary. And we hope you enjoy the rest of the gathering, and thank you for joining us this evening. Have a great rest of your night.